Hey there, it's Ben Everingham and my brother Simon here from Pumped On Property, and in today's video we're going to talk about whether you should buy an existing home or build a brand new property for your first investment property up here in Queensland or in Brisbane at the moment. So in today's video we're going to talk about the positives and negatives of buying an existing property. We're going to talk about the positives and negatives of building a brand new property, and then we're going to walk through Simon's thought process, or Simon as a case study, and why he's decided to go one way or the other. So let's kick it off by talking about existing houses. So from your perspective, Simon, what are some of the benefits of going an existing home as a first time buyer versus going brand new?
Sure, so some of the things that I like about a existing property is the fact that generally you're going to be able to purchase a property that has a larger land component, which can benefit you in the future. Obviously the larger portion of land that you can buy, the better. Some of the other positives is the type of suburbs that you're going to be in. So sometimes you're going to be in a higher quality suburb that's already existing, that has the good infrastructure around it, such as schools, public transport options, shopping centres, things like that, which can also be a benefit. And you also can purchase a little bit closer to the CBD sometimes, or closer to the beaches.
So for those of you who are just buying for the first time, obviously some of this information might be a bit new for you, but in terms of getting the best long-term capital growth potential from your property, there's some rules that you can follow to make sure you do better. And we've talked about these in previous videos, but I'll touch on them lightly now. So the bigger the land size, as Simon said, the better. The closer to the city or being walking distance to the beach, obviously the better if you can afford to be in those areas. And that's just backed by historical performance. So history has showed us that properties closer to the city, closer to the beach on bigger pieces of land end up performing better over time. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about this as your first home that you're going to live in to get access to the grant, but you're also making sure that if you rent it out in the future, then you're going to do the best you possibly can as an investment on this as well.
Great. Some of the other things that can benefit from purchasing your first home as an existing property is the stamp duty concession,
which is a big one at the moment and a really good one, and a really nice piece of bait the government's giving people to get into the market.
Exactly, and also on top of that is the affordability. To purchase an existing property in an existing suburb, generally you're going to get into the market for a lower price as opposed to building a brand new property.
Yep, so generally existing homes are a little bit cheaper than brand new homes, because for brand new, remember, you're paying a premium for the land, you're also paying today's market rates for the build, where on existing homes, they're generally more affordable. And just to touch on that first home buyer's grant and why it is so powerful is, let's say you were to go buy a $400,000 home, if you've got the money to go out there and do that first time round, that could cost you somewhere between sort of $13,000 to $15,000 in stamp duty on top of the deposit and the other costs associated with buying. So that can be a huge amount of money that you don't have to save right now. And even if you only move in for 6 or 12 out of months at the start to take advantage of that, and then you turn it into investment property after that, which is what I did when I got mine and what Simon's planning on doing as well, can be a really nice way to save a big chunk of cash, which is always good.
Perfect. So some of the negatives that can be associated with purchasing an existing property as a first home buyer, is sometimes the maintenance issues can creep up, because obviously that property is a little bit older. Wear and tear is going to occur for those types of properties, so generally you might be up for a little bit of maintenance. So a good recommendation is to have a nice cash buffer sitting on the side for at any point those types of maintenance issues come up. Do you want to touch on some of those maintenance issues?
Yeah, so some of the maintenance issues we're talking about here, like the big unexpected things, because obviously you get your building and pest report on the property before you have to make a decision to buy it if it's an existing home, and that will tell you what the actual issues are. And if you don't feel comfortable reading that report, you can ring up the building and pest inspector and say, hey, if this was your home, what would you actually be doing here, and what would you be concerned about? But it's important to check the oven, it's important to check the stove, it's important to check any air conditioning in the property, and then on top of that to actually have a look at the building and pest report and make sure there's no major issues that are going to be short-term maintenance related stuff for you. And if there are a few things that you find in that building and pest report, you can always ask the person you're buying the property for to provide you with a discount to factor that into your cost of purchase, or to go and fix those issues before you actually buy the property. So I've been caught out by that one before, and almost every investor is at some point in their journey. There's no such thing as an older home that has no maintenance issues, but if you can get it into the best possible condition before you buy it, and then after you buy it, just as Simon said, maybe put away $3,000 to $5,000 in the first 6 months to cover those little things that come up that are unexpected, that are always going to be there, and then once it's in good condition, you can sort of set and forget it for a while without having to stress on it too much.
Exactly, and I guess that comes back to a benefit as well, because sometimes an older property in the future, you're going to have the potential to renovate that property and potentially increase the value or increase the rental return on that property as well.
Yeah, and we love obviously making money on the way in on things we buy, so sometimes when you see a bit of an ugly duckling that needs a paint and needs some carpet, it can be a really big buying opportunity for you as a first time investor to get something that maybe not everyone is looking at, and get in there for that first 6 to 12 months that you're living in it. Spend your weekends like I have cleaning it up. I remember the first home my wife and I bought to live in ourselves, which was actually our third property. I hand painted the roof with a paintbrush, hand painted so many things, built all the garden beds in myself, painted the tiles in the bathrooms and replaced a lot of those things myself. And as my wife said, everything that I did devalued the property. So if you're horrible at handyman stuff like I am, then get your mate around or get someone around there to help you do it. But it's always good fun as well, and also really good stories. I remember, actually,
I know what you're about to start talking about.
So I got one of my mates around to help me with painting the roof, and I got him to, because it was an old home, it was like a 50-year-old home, so he got on the roof with a gurney, like a high pressure hose. And instead of coming down the roof so that the water runs down to the gutter, he went up the roof and sprayed all of the water inside my tiles. I was asleep that night after we'd spent the whole day cleaning the roof, and my entire roof inside my lounge room and kitchen fell in. So he'd wet the gyprock so much that it fell on the floor. I get, again, because I was a tight ass at that time in my life, like everyone is when they're first buying their first home. You just don't have that money at that stage. So I've got my wife's uncle to come around, who's like a handyman. He says he can paint it and patch it. He walks in and he starts peeling back this, it was probably like a garage size hole in the roof, but then he starts peeling back this stringer, and he's like, oh, look at this is peeling off, and he peels it back, and another 2 rooms worth of plaster fall off the roof as well. So I immediately kicked his ass and sent him out the house, and then had to get a professional in there, which ended up costing me a couple of $1,000 to fix it up. So, good stories, good times, good lesson to learn, and that's all the fun and games of going through this stuff and going through this exciting part of the journey that you're now on. Hopefully you don't do those sorts of things that I've done.
Oh, that's all right. It's all part of the process, and experiencing those things. It's how you learn and it's how you move forward, but maybe it's best to talk to a professional first.
Talk to a professional.
Cool. And the last negative that I wanted to talk about with regards to existing properties is the depreciation that you can potentially miss out on.
Yeah, so depreciation, once it becomes an investment property, can be a nice tax benefit. It's definitely not the reason you buy a property, but it is a negative with existing and older homes at the moment. So let's slide on to the positives and negatives now of brand new properties. So as an investor personally, I've done brand new and existing. Simon's looking at doing a brand new one at the moment.
Yeah.
We're neither here nor there on either of them, but there's definitely some positives with brand new as well.
For sure. Obviously, as mentioned, for the existing property, the stamp duty concession that you get is a really good bonus. Plus, you also get the first home owners grant, which in Queensland, as of the new financial year, 2018-19, is going to be $15,000, which can really help you get into that property a lot sooner. Some of the other things that are a really good benefit with that is the depreciation benefits from building a brand new home. Come tax time, you can get a decent bonus as those years go on.
Yeah, and so again, only once it becomes an investment property does it become tax deductible. So, obviously the reason for the first home buyers grant is so that you move into the property and live there. I think at the moment it's either 6 or 12 months, depending on which state in Australia you're in. It only becomes tax deductible after you move out of that property. And again, there's some stuff there, just talk to your accountant about that there. But as Simon said, $15,000 in your hand at the moment to go brand new can be pretty powerful. You know, building isn't for everybody, and some people get stressed out about it, but I would certainly be seriously considering that at the moment, only if you can buy a great suburb and a great piece of land and you're not sacrificing long-term growth by just buying some greenfield estate sort of a long way from the city, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Another really great point I'd like to touch on is if you do decide to convert that one into a rental property after that 6 months, whenever you feel like you want to do it, it's generally the brand new properties can have a higher rental return than the existing properties as well.
It's pretty simple when you think about it. You know, people like to live in brand new stuff, and in a lot of the existing suburbs, either on the beach or close to the CBD, there's not a lot of brand new stock or a lot of choice for that type of product. So if you find a really nice infield piece of land in a good suburb, you know, those things rent generally like hotcakes. You're probably looking for a rental vacancy rate below 2% to make sure that there's strong demand for all product, and then, you know, a brand new house obviously can rent for that premium sometimes as well.
That's right. So let's talk about a couple of the negatives that can be associated with buying a brand new property, and the one that jumps out major for me is generally the land size that you're going to be getting into is going to be a little bit smaller because of price point for a first time buyer. Generally don't have as much money as a sophisticated investor, so to get a decent piece of land you might be looking at 400 square meters as opposed to 650 for an existing home.
And I think that's really important because, as we know, the land is what it increases in value over time. When you're buying property, the house actually depreciates or decreases in value. So there's a rule which is the bigger the land component that you have underneath your home, the more capital growth potential in the future. You know, that said, I have bought properties on smaller blocks before. Actually, I've had 3 properties on blocks that are 400 square meters. I personally don't have an issue with it if it's in a fantastic suburb with great potential in a great street. But if it's just in a greenfield estate, you know, where everybody's got small lots around you and that sort of thing, you know, it might be worth considering going the existing house way. So, you know, in Brisbane, for example, which is kind of what we're talking about in today's video, or southeast Queensland, you know, if you've only got a budget of 400k, then I think it's better to look at existing properties right now as of 2018. But if you've got a budget of sort of $550,000, then there's really interesting options for brand new product as well. So, you know, some of the other negatives that we were talking about before we, like, just planning for this video, you know, they can be more expensive, as I've just mentioned, and not everybody can stomach the building process. That can be a bit overwhelming for some people. If you are thinking about building a brand new property in Queensland or southeast Queensland at the moment, Simon and I know some fantastic builders that we've worked with personally before. We'd be more than happy to introduce you to those guys if you can find yourself a great piece of land and you really want to get the right product at a really, really good price. But we'll talk about that more in a moment. So let's talk about you, Simon. Obviously you're buying your first home in the coming months at the moment. We've been doing a lot of talking around strategy. Why are you going towards the brand new option versus buying the existing home?
For myself, it's going to be a really good asset in my portfolio to begin with. As you've talked about with Ryan in other videos about the 2 properties to financial freedom strategy, I do like the idea of purchasing those foundational properties first. And for myself, because we have really good friends that own those construction companies, taking advantage of those relationships at the moment is great, and also taking advantage of the first home owners grant. I really love the opportunity that the government's going to give me $15,000 just to get into the market.
I would take it.
So that's one of the major reasons. I've had the possibility to purchase an existing property and get into the market a little bit sooner, but for myself, understand that this is a long-term play. I wanted to get myself into a low maintenance property that's going to pay for itself in the beginning so that I can still maintain the kind of quality of life and save up for those future investments as well.
So what Simon's doing and what we've decided to do, which is very similar to what I did when I was kicking it off, is he's going to use the first home buyer's grant to go buy a piece of land and get free stamp duty on that land. Then he's going to go to a builder and get the right design. Now, you know, Simon's going to get that extra $15,000 from the grant, the government, which is $15,000 for the deposit that he doesn't have to save, which is a huge help, plus the 15 grand that he'll save in stamp duty. So Simon's not just building his standard product, because his intention is to live in the property for the first 6 or 12 months and then turn it into an investment property after that. So we're going to try and buy something close to the city, within sort of 20-21 kilometres from the CBD. He's not just building his standard home either. He's actually building a house, like a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home here, with a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom granny flat there. Now, while he's living in the home, he actually can't legally rent any of it out to qualify for that grant. But as soon as he's finished his 6 or 12 months living in that home, he's actually going to rent out the house plus the granny flat separately. So not only is he getting free stamp duty, a great grant, buying a really good piece of land close to the city, he's also getting a dual income property. Now, for those of you who haven't seen that 2 Properties to Financial Freedom video, we talk about how you can buy 2 houses, build 2 granny flats on them, and within 15 to 25 years achieve financial freedom. So Simon's going to go out there and do that. He's going to buy 2 houses and build 2 granny flats on them. In 15 years time, he should be getting at least $1,000 a week from each of them, giving him about $2,000 a week, or 100 grand of passive income. And now Simon and I have to talk about how he can own those properties outright in that time. Now, Simon's what, 25 now?
Yes.
25 now. By the time he's 40, he'll have $100,000 of income minimum coming in for the rest of his life without having to do anything more. You know, when most of his mates aren't going to be retired till they're at least 70. So if that's something that you're interested in, Simon and I would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session where we can talk about where you're at and where you're looking to go longer term. We can talk you through the building process, or buying an existing house. Regardless if I'm buying for my family to live in or an investment property, I always keep my investment cap on, because it's so important to make really smart decisions. So jump over to www.pumpedonproperty.com, hit free strategy session, and let's have a little bit of a talk about where you are and how you can take advantage of current market conditions. So until next time, thank you so much and really appreciate your time. Bye.
Bye.